Hi all, it's Dr. Sarah Clark Kaplan, Executive Director of the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center here at American University. And on behalf of the ARPC and PAC, we're welcoming you back to our Farm Bill Summer, a series of rapid response Instagram Live conversations with leading activists and experts regarding turning the Farm Bill toward racial justice, which we've been working on, as you know, consistently over the last year and a half. And in honor of Black August, happy August everyone, our next two live streams are going to be focused on thinking about questions of Black equity, justice, self-determination, and liberation in relation to farm policy in general and the Farm Bill in particular. Today we're going to be talking about food sovereignty, food systems, and the Farm Bill in relation particularly to Black folk and Indigenous folks. And joining us, we have Dr. Jasmine R. Jackson, the co-executive director of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. Dr. Jazz, as most of us during policy-based specialist. She partners with academic research teams, anchor institutions, philanthropic foundations, and community-based organizations to identify the root causes of and develop innovative solutions to food system challenges. Dr. Jazz received her master's degree in community planning from Auburn University and her PhD in integrated public policy and development from Tuskegee University, yet another reason why we always want to fund HBCUs, land-grant universities. As a New Orleans native and farmer, she has developed a unique perspective when it comes to food and the effects that it has on communities. Dr. Jazz believes that your zip code should not determine your life expectancy and that building relationships is essential to creating a sustainable and just food system. Welcome today, Dr. Jasmine Jackson. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. Appreciate you reading that beautiful bio and welcoming me with the Alliance into this live series.
Well, we are just so excited to have you here. We wanted to have that conversation with you, and we are just so excited that we have you here in general and for Black August in particular. And I want to just take a minute, maybe before we start, to situate this conversation. It is Black August, and it's, a kind of key moment, as you were pointing out to me earlier. How can we understand this conversation that we are about to have today alongside a broader ongoing work for Black liberation and self-determination, and how it relates to food in particular, both historically and today?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I want to shout out Isis, our communications coordinator, who definitely wanted to be sure that we highlighted Black August. And there's more information on our Instagram. So I'll just highlight that Black August, we know this as like a fight for political prisoners, but we at the Alliance also see it about freeing the land, and it's about food and land sovereignty as well. So we want to be sure that we name that our Black liberation is linked to our self-determination as we fight over food and land. And today, ironically, maybe not ironically, but on August 21st, it is also a revolution over land and Black food sovereignty from the Haitian Revolution and Nat Turner's Rebellion. So both of those happened on August 21st. So just wanted to name that in the essence of Black August, as we are addressing these community needs through action, and we're tackling these existing systems for that are impeding our Black liberation and self-determination, that we at the Alliance want to recognize our disciplined struggle to continue this work to freeing our people from food apartheid. And that is how we're linking it for Black August. But I do suggest you go onto our Instagram to read more about that for your pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you so much also, Dr. Jazz, for bringing up Isis Amusa. Isis Amusa, who is a communications worker at the Alliance, was previously part of the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center team and an integral part to the creation of our Pointing the Farm Bill Toward Racial Justice Toolkit, which you can access on our website and at the link in our bio above, which incorporates so many things that we learned from our Farm Bill Summit, at which folks from the Alliance spoke, as well as numerous other BIPOC racial justice, agricultural justice, and land justice organizations, we're part of. So, when you talk about Nat Turner and you talk about Haiti, one of the things that comes to mind for me is that there is a long history, both of the ways in which, there's a really long history of the ways in which Black folk have been dispossessed of their labor and their land, even as they have provided the work to turn land into sustainable food and sites for home for others and for themselves. So this history of Black liberation and Black self-determination as related to food and to land has an incredibly long history, right? I mean, Nat Turner working on a plantation, Haiti as an extractive colonial site of slavery, and the only revolution where everybody was free at the end in the whole age of revolutions. National Black Food and Justice Alliance is part of that history. So tell me, what can you tell us about the history of the organization, the history of the work you do, and a little bit about some of these terms we've been throwing around, like food justice, food sovereignty, Black self-determination, and even what does it mean when we talk about Black farmers in the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And food has always been used as a political weapon. And I want to be clear, in honor of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and that you can read more about in Dr. Monica White's Freedom Farmers books. But knowing that we have the ability to build and be free with the practice of land. So just wanted to name that that's what the Alliance was built on, being sure that we wanted to come together for food sovereignty, self-determining food economies, and land justice. And we do it all through organizing people and building institutions and amplifying our culture. We're a member-based organization, so we have over 50 members that are organizations that also have members, some of them as well. But we do this collective work, and we know that it needs to happen so that we can move forward together. And I'm so sorry that my notes are not moving forward. I have another screen on in the background, but we do have a Black food glossary. Also, shout out to Isis that she created, where we define food justice and also food sovereignty. And I want to just name the main difference that I know for me, that food sovereignty is that we have the right to operate and own and dictate where our food goes and how the foodways exist, and not just being a participant in the food system. So more of the ownership piece. And I do have a baby in the background, so I'm just going to pick him up as he's getting fussy.
Please pick him up because, right, first of all, anyone who's been listening to this stream knows that being a reproductive justice activist and scholar, we never get to do anything here without talking about reproductive politics and reproductive justice. And one of the things that we always talk about, right, is that Black women, we do our academic intellectual work, we do our justice work, and we do care work. And that is what it means actually to think about justice, Black justice work. So thank you for fitting us in while you are doing all the kinds of work that are all necessary and important to actually imagining a future of Black liberation and who we're doing it for. And welcome to our so far youngest participant in the conversation. So I want to ask you one other thing. So one of the things that I think is really special about the Alliance that I want to highlight are the ways in which you function thinking about land and land-based freedom, but also thinking about the relationship for not just Black farmers, but also Indigenous people in the U.S. Can you talk a little bit about how you understand the relationship of Black self-determination and Black land sovereignty, but also the Alliance's recognition of Indigenous sovereignty as well?
Yes. So we definitely don't feed into the Black versus brown idea. I know a lot of contention has definitely come up in communities about land back strategies and how there have been so many people and so many generations that have been on this land. So we definitely work together and want to figure out how to rematriate land with Black and brown people and all of the harms that have been made. So it is a work in progress. We definitely don't have the solution. We're in conversation and trying to figure that out together. What does it look like to actually remove land from the speculative market and not have it either bought or sold anymore, but forever stewarded by people that are in right relationship with the land? So that's definitely our goal, to remove the land from the market, for it to not be used for extractive and capitalistic purposes, but more to sustain ourselves and sustain each other.
I love that. And I love the ways in which you're really framing us in the context of that critique of how racial capitalism is both anti-Black and anti-Indigenous, right? And that land in that context will never actually produce freedom. But I think what's amazing is y'all are working both with like pushing the system beyond its current structures, but also working to really produce concrete policy changes within the structures that exist. And I know that the Alliance has been involved really actively for at least almost 5 years now in conversation with Senators Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren on the idea of a Justice for Black Farmers Act. And I want to hear, like, I know this has been a long project. I know that we'd hoped that some of this would really appear in, the Farm Bill 2023/24/ who really knows when it's actually ever going to happen. For those who are new to this series, just a reminder, the U.S. Farm Bill gets reauthorized every 5 years, but it is an omnibus piece of legislation. So we talk about it as a bill, but really it's all these different acts that are kind of combined together into a single massive piece of legislation, billions of dollars involved, like huge numbers of programs involved. And one of the real hopes was that a Justice for Black Farmers Act would be able to be part of this Farm Bill conversation for the 2023-24 reauthorization. Where are we with that?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I'll give us a little bit of history. Fortunately, we at the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, some of our members, Dara Cooper, our founding executive director, actually was on sabbatical at the time that this legislation was drafted, sitting at the table with Senator Booker and Senator Warnock's staff, and being sure that this was specific legislation that included Black farmers, because Black farmers have been excluded specifically from past legislation. And I can just name like a few for sure. I always think about the 1935 Social Security Act, where it excluded agricultural workers and domestic servants, which were majority Black, Hispanic, Asian, minority farmers, minority opportunities that did not exist even in the 1935 Wagner Act, where the unions were permitted to exclude non-whites. So that did not allow access to better pay and benefits for jobs. And even redlining, I know that people are like, oh, that stopped being legal in 1962, but we're definitely still feeling the effects of gentrification and concentrated wealth in white neighborhoods from these specific legislations that excluded Black people legally. So now that we're asking for Black people to be included legally, it seems that it's an issue. Like now it's about race, but it seems to always have been that way. But honestly, the Justice for Black Farmers Act, it provides so many opportunities that has existed to other races in the past. So this legislation provides technical assistance, land, just like the Homestead Act did, the equipment, infrastructure, and also regenerative agriculture training opportunities. It reduces barriers for funding and predatory reporting. And those are some non-monetary equitable reliefs that are needed for Black farmers that are included in this act. But it also includes some monetary acts of forgiving of debt that has never been fully sought. Even the original Pickford and Glickman case that actually was expanded in the 2008 Farm Bill that may not be known to a lot of people, where it provided additional funds for some claims that were related to like admin costs, but the crucial debt relief that has been promised and the recovery of that land that was stolen has never been enacted. So we definitely want to include this Justice for Black Farmers Act in the Farm Bill, or some types of like provisions of it, because we need to ensure that we're being explicit about what's happening for Black farmers.
Exactly. And I think, one of the things that folks will be talking about again in our next session, actually next week, on conservation and Black farming. But, one of the things I think that folks don't realize that you're pointing to so clearly, Dr. Jass, is that this isn't just about some kind of notion that, Black farmers experience racism and so therefore they need an extra hand, or any of these kinds of like deeply troubling racist narratives rooted in this idea of like Black entitlement programs. Instead, what we're talking about is a long-standing history in which U.S. agricultural wealth has been built on increased debt bondage for Black farm workers and then Black farmers and landowners, right? And that this history of like incurring debt, this history of deep dependence and poverty rooted in the sort of history of farming has been something that, that previous farm bills, that previous legislation, that previous lawsuits have sought to address and to rectify, but that still produces a massive disadvantage. And, one of the things I know you and I have talked about and we'll be talking about next week is that even when we talk about something like regenerative agriculture, that we're talking about a history in which Black farmers were encouraged and incentivized to move away from traditional knowledges and expertises and ways of using the land toward modes of high input, high tech, high equipment investment farming that was supposed to increase productivity and wealth, and that now, increased a huge amount of debt, and that now, as they try to make the move back to regenerative agriculture, which is what they were already doing, it's leading to even more incurring of debt. So these things that you're talking about in the Justice for Black Farmers Act are really rooted in a history. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. This is not something that we just came up with because we want to feel good. This is deserved and literally been written out to continue to make it difficult for Black farmers to survive and even to get into the business of farming and providing food for their communities.
Yeah, and since it is Black August, I feel like I have to put the push out there. All those people who are like, reparations are impossible. This is a really good example of how reparations can work on a particular industry-based, region-based scale, right? Because this is a lot of what we're talking about. It's reparation for years of debt exploitation and anti-Black racism. So why do you think, we know, looking at the forms of the Farm Bill proposals that are forward right now, there is nothing like the Justice for Black Farmers Act, any of those kinds of ideas included in the proposed legislation? Why do you think it stalled out? What do you think is happening?
Yeah, it's not a bipartisan bill. It doesn't feel that people are buying into knowing that when Black people win, we all win. It's not a exclusionary. The language has become that you can't even say Black. You can't have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and specific, opportunities that target Black people and giving the resources that are deserved and required for basic needs of life. So it feels that right now Black isn't sexy anymore. It was a few years ago, but I will name that people are moving away from what's right, and knowing that the Justice for Black Farmers Act in the title, there are different other minorities that are being included in the act as well. The land and also the opportunities for training, the 1890 land grant institutions. Not only Black people go to those, so these are providing $500 million for 10 years. That's in the Justice for Black Farmers Act, and that would touch so many people. And I feel that it's not being included because it feels that people are painting the narrative that it's exclusionary when it's more inclusion.
I think, this is such a key thing. And for those of you, I'm just speaking to my racial justice listeners out there who may not know as much about farm policy or farm politics, at the same time as you're speaking out against the elimination of, particular curriculum and particular books, and we're talking about the elimination of DEI programs on college campuses and the end of affirmative action, that this is also happening in the area of agricultural policy, that this pushback against these initiatives to try to increase equity and repair long histories of exclusion are being painted as exclusionary, as unnecessary, as handouts, as divisive. And that this is another area where we need to be really turning our attention and thinking about how this is part of a national push back against whatever progress has been made toward addressing anti-Blackness and the broader structures of white supremacy in the U.S. over the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
So, go on, Dr. Jess. Yeah.
No, I was amen. And absolutely, this is why it's needed. And I definitely, have some hopes that maybe parts of it can come in, but then maybe it can be reintroduced again. It's been reintroduced twice already, but hoping that we're going to continue to push for this legislation that's so crucial for our community.
Awesome. So I want to turn for a minute to the Farm Bill again, and not just what isn't in it or what we keep trying to balance, talking about the bit of a dumpster fire that is the current legislation, and really encouraging folks to push for what changes can be made, pushing more towards the Justice for Black Farmers Act, inclusions, et cetera. But also, we had some like a bunch of organizations had a bunch of really powerful transformative goals for this 2023-24 reauthorization. And I want to just list what the Alliance, what the National Black Food and Justice Alliance had put forth as 4 key areas of profound transformation for this cycle. And you had improving opportunities for startup and expansion of local and self-reliant Black food economies. You had investing in Black food sovereignty and an emerging Black food movement. You had including climate regenerative practices and programs as priorities in the Farm Bill. And you had increasing access to food assistance for Black and Brown communities who face crises of hunger and malnutrition. And all of these, I think, are really key. We know that we need to work on all of those. But I want to take a minute just for our audience, because it kind of connects to some of the other conversations we've been having. Tell me the 2 that might seem less immediately obvious as central to a Black food and justice organization. Why is it important for the Alliance that the Farm Bill include climate regenerative practices and programs as priorities in the Farm Bill? What makes these questions of climate and regenerative ag central to your considerations of Black food sovereignty and Black self-determination for Black folks?
Absolutely. Just as you mentioned earlier, Sarah, these are ways that we have been operating, but have been led away from, and now to practices that are more extractive for not only ourselves, but also the earth. And it feels that the regenerative agriculture practices are more expensive. Like you mentioned, they are bringing farmers into more debt to be organic, to not spray the pesticides and the fungicides that are, damaging our lungs and our communities and our soil. So in order to continue being back in right relationship with the land, it is definitely needed for us to divest from those practices that conflict with the land. It does not feel right to have a farm bill that provides funding that destroys the food system. That feels contradicting. So we're asking for to explore a universal basic income for Black land stewards that are engaged in these practices that are providing climate mitigation, climate adaptation, that is healing the land literally and providing these alternatives. So we also want to be sure that we're investing in these agricultural practices and these community-based solutions, because it feels like people know what they need. People know what they need. So just being sure that we're actually facilitating these community conversations, implementing the public comments. Stop asking if you're not going to do something about it, but actually meaningfully consult with people in the communities that are being most affected by these climate crises, and being sure that they're having the opportunity to be in right relationship with the land and acknowledging the indigenous ways and practices and being provided resources to continue that.
This is so crucial, and I think, just for those who may not have heard our earlier kind of breakdown with Dr. Garrett Grady Lovelace of the current proposed farm bill legislation coming out of the House in particular, I just want to flag for you all again, what we're seeing in the conservation title is moving really away from helping small farmers, marginalized farmers invest in things like regenerative agriculture, and instead really prioritizing funds for so-called conservation programs by large-scale agribusiness, which really just means them buying their way out of pollution. So we've talked a little about this, and I think it's such a crucial thing. We'll be coming back again next week and the week after. We're talking about conservation next week, and then about farm work with Alianza Nacional de Campesinos the week after. And I think both of those are going to really push home again why issues of climate and issues of ecologically sustainable farming are also really profound racial justice issues. But talk a little bit, let's get back to, the core food here. Let's talk about not rural food, but about SNAP for a minute. What is the relationship between food systems, food sovereignty, farm self-determination, and food access in the Farm Bill? Why has SNAP's been so drastically rolled back in the current Farm Bill legislation? But that's not really where the problem starts, right? Like, we know we've had a lot of people pushing to change the SNAP provisions, but where is the question of food access for low-income Black and Brown people? Where does that problem really start?
Yeah, it starts with the price of food. It doesn't the narrative is that some people have to choose over basic needs and buying food. The price and cost of food and the ways that the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or food stamps, has benefited Black and Brown families, and all families, not just Black and Brown, but being sure that they have the opportunity to have some supplemental income to purchase that food. And there's been many programs that match food dollars at farmers markets, a double bucks program. There's so many ways that farmers themselves have been able to provide food for SNAP benefits. And it's been definitely a point of contingency that is like what the majority of the farm bill exists of for dollars for SNAP benefits, and it's always under attack. But I just want to name that there's so many barriers right now that the amount of money that people are getting currently is not enough. The ways that the requirements for the work requirements, the requirements for having certain paperwork. So even like farm workers and migrant workers and meat packers, they aren't included in food assistance programs because they don't have the necessary documentation to apply and prove that their food assistance is needed. So the main people who are actually providing food for us aren't able to participate in these food assistance programs. So there's lots of work acts like the Protecting America's Meat Workers Act, the PAMWIS, what people are referring it to. But there's different ways that we know even incarcerated, formerly incarcerated folks are not eligible if they have specific charges to even apply for food assistance, increasing the recidivism rate, which is not conducive to us moving forward on being sure that people have what they need. And I just will name college students and how their work requirements there, and then even cooperatives. So we at the Alliance, we're big on, you know, building cooperatives, which are community-owned grocery stores that provide food and retail opportunities. And their point of sale to even accept SNAP benefits is in delay. If they're opening a co-op, they may have to prove 2 to 4, maybe even 8 weeks of getting in sales before being able to accept SNAP benefits, which is definitely a barrier in a lot of our communities. So just naming that the resources are out there, and there is funding. They're finding funding for all of these other things that are not in like right relationship with the earth. So just want to be sure that we're naming that SNAP benefits does not need to take a cut. It definitely needs to be increased, and it will provide access to not just food for people to consume, but also for farmers to have food dollars and being able to get their food to their communities.
Exactly. You know, and I think one of the things that's so amazing about the work that you do, and I heard Isis even was talking about this beautifully the other day, is that food access is an absolute crucial frontline issue in all of the ways that you were just speaking. And much like something like universal health care, the problem is also that the kind of work that you all are doing in all of your kinds of programs and initiatives is how do we make food more affordable? And that requires changing the relationships throughout the food system in all of the ways that you're talking about, so that we're not in a system where we're trying to figure out which percentage of the population gets access to affordable food when the rest of the world is paying for unaffordable food, right? Like, how do we change these production systems? And I think the work you all are doing around this is so absolutely crucial. So I want to hear last things that I didn't get to that you wanted to make sure that you said, and then I want to ask you, what do we do? What do we do right now? Where do we go from here facing this moment? But first, tell me anything I've missed, anything you're like, I really need to still say this.
I really want to say the problem statement on why the Alliance was founded, and it just really names and why we're doing the work today. So I'll briefly read this, and you can find this on our website. But we live in a corporate-dominated food system that prioritizes the maximization of profit over human life. The system is extractive, exploitive, and deeply anti-Black. In the U.S., we have witnessed the systemic dismantling of Black land ownership in both the rural and urban context. And at the same time, our Black foodways, why we eat, what we eat, and what it means are being disappeared. And we lack access to and control over the production, distribution, and consumption of food that is healthy and grown in ecologically sustainable ways. We live in the aftermath of deindustrialization, the gutting of infrastructure, and the withering away of the social safety net. So that's why we're doing the work that we're doing. I just want to name that statement will be 10 years old, our organization next year. And the statement was written like to be true today. Like, it still stands true. So what we're doing collectively, organizing and amplifying the needs of our community is necessary because of the system that we are subject to. So I really want to encourage like continued support and collaboration. Definitely, it's not just about the success of Black farmers. It's more about a sustainable and just food system for everybody. So I really want to like encourage people to work together in building this future for food sovereignty and land justice that's accessible to everyone and not just a few and the wealthy. So I really want to be sure that people know that they can join our policy table. For Black people that are interested in continuing this conversation, the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, we meet. So you can reach out to me or anyone at info@blackfoodjustice.org to learn more about that policy table invite. But then also maybe join an organization that's in your neighborhood. Like there's SAFON, the Southeastern African American Food Organic Network. There's so many different other organizations that are also just in this fight for liberation and food sovereignty. I definitely suggest that you all look that up. And last, we talked a little bit about climate, but there is a Black Climate Mandate by the Movement for Black Lives, Black Hive, that I definitely suggest people take a look at to really explore and like dream what the future could be if we really took this seriously and provided the resources that were needed.
Thank you, Dr. Jazz. That was just so powerful. I want to say a couple things. If you're watching this live, come back when it goes up as a reel, and we will have so many of those things that we just listed in our linked in our bio, so you can look at these organizations, you can look at these documents. And I want to really thank you to Dr. Jazz and to the Alliance in general for reminding us that what it means to point the Farm Bill toward racial justice is never just about the Farm Bill. It is about understanding that farm justice equals food justice, equals climate justice, equals racial justice, equals reproductive justice. That these issues are connected, that we are in this struggle together, and that when we get through this next Farm Bill cycle, that whatever we are faced with, it's important to fight for what we want right now, but it's even more important to continue to build a more racially just system for food and sustenance and community, whatever we see in the halls of Congress. So thank you, Dr. Jazz. We'll be hearing more from you in the future. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. Peace and happy Black August.
Everybody.